Number 1. Lamar Odom, the champion who fell hard. The image is unforgettable. June 17, 2010, Staples Center roaring with triumph, confetti raining down in gold and purple. In the middle of the chaos stood Lamar Odom, his smile wide and unguarded, his hands wrapped tightly around the 2010 NBA championship trophy. The bright lights caught the gleam in his eyes, the joy of a man who had fought his way from the unforgiving streets of Queens to the highest peak of basketball glory. To fans, it was the picture of success, a story of perseverance rewarded. But for Odom, that golden night was just one chapter in a life that had always balanced on a thin edge. The applause of the crowd masking private battles that fame could never erase. Lamar Joseph Odom's rise to NBA stardom was not inevitable. Born in South Jamaica, Queens, he grew up surrounded by instability. His father was largely absent, consumed by heroin addiction, and his mother died of colon cancer when he was just 12. Shuffled between relatives and mentors, basketball became his constant, a way to escape the grief, the poverty, and the chaos. His natural gifts were undeniable. At 6'10" with guard-like ball handling, he was a mismatch nightmare. High school dominance led to a standout season at the University of Rhode Island, and by 1999, the Los Angeles Clippers made him the 4th overall pick in the NBA draft. For a young man from Queens, this was the dream. On the court, Odom was the definition of versatility. He could score, rebound, pass, a true point forward who made his teammates better. But his early years weren't without bumps. A marijuana suspension in 2001 hinted at the temptations surrounding him, yet it didn't derail his career. In 2004, he was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, where his game found new meaning alongside Kobe Bryant. Odom became the Lakers' glue guy, the unselfish star who could step into any role. His rebounding and playmaking were essential in the Lakers' back-to-back titles in 2009 and 2010, cementing his place in franchise history. To most of the world, Lamar Odom was the ultimate success story. Two-time NBA champion, beloved teammate, adored by fans. But behind the smile, the struggles never truly left. Fame brought money, attention, and opportunities, but it also magnified old wounds. Odom's life outside basketball was a whirlwind of personal highs and lows. He married Khloe Kardashian in 2009 after just 1 month of dating, thrusting him into reality TV fame. The cameras followed him everywhere, but what they didn't fully capture were the private battles. The grief over losing his 6-month-old son in 2006, the unresolved pain from childhood, and the constant pull of unhealthy coping mechanisms. The whispers of drug use followed Odom for years, sometimes dismissed as rumors, other times breaking into public headlines. Friends and teammates described periods where he seemed distant, struggling to focus. In 2013, the facade began to crack. News outlets reported that Odom was battling a serious drug problem, including cocaine. He took a leave from the NBA, and his marriage to Khloe unraveled under the strain. The man who once commanded the court seemed to be losing control of his life. The breaking point came in October 2015. Odom was found unconscious at the Love Ranch, a legal brothel in Crystal, Nevada. He had suffered a drug overdose after reportedly using cocaine and herbal sexual stimulants over several days. When paramedics arrived, his heart had stopped twice, and he was in a coma. The prognosis was grim. Media outlets prepared obituaries, fans prayed, and the sports world braced for tragedy. For several days, Odom's fate hung in the balance, machines keeping him alive as doctors worked to undo the damage. Miraculously, Lamar Odom survived, but the road back was long and grueling. He suffered multiple strokes, kidney failure, and had to relearn how to walk, talk, and even feed himself. In interviews afterward, he admitted that he had been in a dark place, consumed by drugs, grief, and guilt. He described waking up in the hospital and realizing how close he had come to losing everything. His recovery became a story of resilience, but also a cautionary tale about how quickly success can unravel when demons go unaddressed. Public sympathy for Odom was immense. Fans remembered his kindness, his easygoing personality, and his generosity. He became a symbol of survival, proof that it was possible to come back from the brink. But basketball, the game that had carried him through so much, would not be part of that comeback. Odom never played in the NBA again. He made appearances in celebrity basketball events, participated in interviews, and even returned briefly to reality TV, but the court where he once thrived was now part of his past. In the years since, Odom has spoken openly about his addiction, the loss of his son, and the pain he carried for decades. He has credited rehab, therapy, and faith for helping him rebuild his life. He's launched a CBD product line, written a memoir titled Darkness to Light, and tried to use his story to help others avoid his mistakes. Still, his journey remains a reminder of the thin line between triumph and tragedy, and how even the brightest stars can burn out if the darkness around them goes unchecked. Looking back, Lamar Odom's story is not just about drugs or basketball. It's about survival. The image of him holding that championship trophy in 2010 will always be iconic, but so too will the image of him walking out of a hospital, frail but alive, against all odds. His life is proof that no victory on the court can erase the battles fought off of it, and that sometimes the greatest win is simply staying alive. Number 2. O.J. Mayo, the banned future star. The grainy footage from 2008 still carries the energy of a fresh arrival, a young man in a crisp Memphis Grizzlies uniform, his smile wide, his movements confident, his shots smooth and unhurried. Commentators' voices cut through the crowd noise. This kid's the next big thing. Watch out for O.J. Mayo. At just 21 years old, Mayo seemed destined for greatness. He had the swagger of a veteran, the scoring touch of a natural-born shooter, and the kind of court vision that made coaches salivate. For a franchise desperate for a new star, he was the answer. For fans, he was hope in sneakers. But beneath the highlight reels and early hype, Mayo's story was heading for a turn few saw coming, one that would see him exiled from the league he had worked his entire life to join. Ovind Jeremiah Mayo's basketball journey began in Huntington, West Virginia, where his talent stood out before he was even a teenager. By middle school, he was already being talked about in national recruiting circles, and his high school career only amplified the hype. He was a scorer with a silky jumper and the kind of athleticism that made every move look effortless. Colleges lined up, but Mayo chose USC, instantly becoming one of the most high-profile recruits in the nation. His single season in Los Angeles cemented his reputation: 20.7 points per game, first-team All-Pac-10 honors, and a ticket to the NBA draft after just 1 year. When the Minnesota Timberwolves selected Mayo third overall in the 2008 draft before trading him to the Memphis Grizzlies in a blockbuster deal, the expectation was clear: he was going to be a franchise player. In his rookie year, he didn't disappoint. Mayo averaged 18.5 points per game, finishing second in Rookie of the Year voting behind Derrick Rose. He was efficient, confident, and seemed poised for a long, productive career. For Memphis, still searching for an identity, Mayo was a building block, a player who could fill seats and make the scoreboard light up. But success in the NBA is about more than skill. It's about discipline, focus, and the ability to navigate the endless temptations that come with fame, money, and freedom. In Mayo's second and third seasons, cracks began to show. His scoring dipped slightly, his role shifted as new players arrived, and his once sharp image started to blur. In 2011, he was suspended for 10 games after testing positive for dehydroepiandrosterone, DHEA, a performance-enhancing substance banned by the league. Mayo claimed it came from an over-the-counter energy drink, but the suspension planted a seed of doubt about his professionalism. Still, he managed to stay in the league, moving on from Memphis to stints with the Dallas Mavericks and Milwaukee Bucks. He had moments, flashes of the old O.J. Mayo who could take over a game with his scoring, but he never fully reclaimed the rising star momentum of his rookie season. By 2016, at just 28 years old, he was a journeyman guard, trying to hold on to a roster spot. Then came the moment that ended his NBA career. In July 2016, the league announced that O.J. Mayo had been dismissed and disqualified for violating the terms of the NBA-NBPA anti-drug program. Unlike his earlier suspension, this was not a short-term ban. This was a 2-year exile, the most severe punishment short of a lifetime ban. The details were never publicly disclosed, in keeping with league policy, but reports suggested it involved a drug of abuse, a category that includes substances like cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin. For Mayo, the effect was immediate and devastating. He could not play, could not sign with any NBA team, and could only apply for reinstatement after the suspension ended. The news sent shockwaves through the basketball world. Here was a player who, just a few years earlier, had been one of the brightest young stars in the league, now effectively erased from it. The headlines painted the picture of a wasted career, and the silence from Mayo himself only fueled speculation. Friends and former teammates expressed sadness more than anger, recalling his talent and charisma, but also acknowledging that the league's grind, the travel, the pressure, the constant scrutiny can be unforgiving to anyone struggling off the court. For the next 2 years, O.J. Mayo was a ghost in the NBA conversation. He trained privately, spoke sparingly, and watched as the league moved on without him. When his ban was finally lifted in 2018, there was no rush of teams lining up for his signature. The NBA had changed, and Mayo's name was no longer one that excited general managers. Determined to keep playing, he turned to international basketball, signing with clubs in Puerto Rico, China, and Taiwan. Far from the spotlight of the NBA, he became a veteran presence, still capable of putting up big scoring nights, but now playing in front of smaller crowds and less television coverage. In interviews since, Mayo has spoken about his mistakes with a mix of regret and perspective. He's admitted that he didn't fully appreciate the opportunity he had in the NBA, and that the discipline required to stay at the top wasn't something he mastered early enough. He's also talked about personal losses, including the death of his father, and how those moments affected him deeply. Whether he will ever get another chance in the NBA remains uncertain, but his journey stands as a stark reminder that talent is only part of the equation. O.J. Mayo's story is not one of a player who was never good enough. It's the story of a player who was more than good enough, but who lost his way in a league that demands not just skill, but stability. His rookie year highlight reels still circulate online, a reminder of what might have been. In them, you see the same confident young man who once had the basketball world in his hands. You also see, if you know the whole story, how quickly that grip can slip. O.J. Mayo's fall from grace was swift and shocking, but this was only the beginning. The NBA's history is filled with players who watched their talent slip away because of temptation. Do you know which All-Star was handed a lifetime ban? In Chapter 3, we'll meet Michael Ray Richardson, a superstar the world knew as Sugar, until cocaine took everything away. If you're loving these untold NBA stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Number 3. Michael Ray Richardson, Talent versus Temptation. The roar of Madison Square Garden in the early 80s was unlike anything else in basketball, a mix of street energy and Broadway drama, all focused on the hardwood. At the center of it was a man they called Sugar, a nickname as smooth as his game. Michael Ray Richardson was electric, a blur on the fast break, a tenacious defender, and a crowd favorite whose smile could light up the Garden's old, smoky air. When he had the ball in his hands, fans leaned forward because something exciting was about to happen. He wasn't just a player, he was an event. But just as quickly as he rose, temptation crept in from the shadows, and Sugar would soon learn that even the brightest lights can't hide the dangers waiting off the court. Born in Lubbock, Texas in 1955 and raised in Denver, Richardson's path to the NBA was a mix of raw talent and relentless hustle. At the University of Montana, a school hardly known for producing basketball stars, he became a legend. He was a triple-threat guard, lightning fast in transition, deadly with his mid-range jumper, and a defensive menace who loved to pick opponents' pockets. The New York Knicks saw more than just skill. They saw a future franchise cornerstone. With the 4th overall pick in the 1978 NBA draft, they brought Sugar to the city that never sleeps. It didn't take long for Richardson to win over New York. By his second season, he led the league in assists and steals, an incredibly rare feat that spoke to both his court vision and his defensive instincts. He was named an All-Star 3 times, and by the early 80s, Knicks fans were chanting his name in the same breath as Bernard King and other Garden greats. He had the style of a playground legend, but the production of a true pro. Opposing guards dreaded facing him, not just because he could score in bursts, but because he could shut them down entirely. But success in New York came with a price. The nightlife was intoxicating, the city's temptations endless. For a young man who had suddenly found fame and fortune, the line between celebration and self-destruction blurred easily. Richardson's first public sign of trouble came in 1983 when he checked into an NBA-approved rehabilitation program for drug abuse. He was honest about his struggles, even telling reporters about his battles with cocaine. But each time he seemed ready to make a clean break, old habits resurfaced. The NBA, still reeling from the public relations nightmare of drug use in the early 80s,
kept a closer eye on Richardson. Commissioner David Stern had vowed to clean up the league's image, and repeated violations of the drug policy were met with increasingly severe punishments. Richardson was suspended multiple times, each suspension longer than the last. He kept returning, kept playing, and kept showing flashes of the player he once was, but the off-court issues wouldn't go away. The breaking point came in February 1986. After yet another failed drug test for cocaine, the NBA handed Michael Ray Richardson a lifetime ban. It was a decision both shocking and inevitable. For fans, it felt like the sudden end of a chapter. One day Sugar was thrilling crowds, and the next he was gone. Richardson became the first player in league history to be permanently banned for drug use, a cautionary tale during an era when the NBA was trying to shed its reputation for rampant substance abuse. Losing the NBA could have ended his career entirely, but Richardson wasn't ready to hang up his sneakers. He took his talents overseas, playing in Italy and France, where the pressure was different and the spotlight dimmer. European fans embraced him, appreciating his flair and experience, and he extended his playing career well into the 1990s. While the NBA door remained closed, basketball itself never left his life. Eventually, Richardson transitioned into coaching, working with minor league and international teams. Off the court, he began speaking more openly about his addiction, admitting that cocaine had cost him not just his career but years of his life. In interviews, he displayed a mix of regret and acceptance, acknowledging the pain of his mistakes while also pointing to the lessons he hoped others could learn from his story. His honesty earned him respect from younger players who might otherwise have dismissed him as just another fallen star. Richardson's legacy is complicated. Statistically, he was on pace for a Hall of Fame-worthy career, a guard who could dominate both ends of the court and dictate the flow of a game. But his story also reflects the NBA's turbulent early 80s, a time when the league's cultural explosion was mirrored by an equally explosive drug problem. He became both a victim of and a poster child for that era's excesses. Today, when Sugar Richardson's name comes up among older Knicks fans, it's often with a wistful tone. They remember the no-look passes, the impossible steals, the way he could take over the Garden in an instant. They also remember the headlines, the suspensions, and the moment they realized he'd never wear a Knicks jersey again. For all his talent, Richardson's career became a reminder that the NBA's biggest battles aren't always fought on the court. In the end, Michael Ray Richardson's story is as much about resilience as it is about downfall. While the NBA chapter closed abruptly, he kept finding ways to stay connected to the game, to rebuild, and to use his platform, however diminished, to warn others about the dangers he once underestimated. "The only reason I'm here," he once said in an interview, "is because God gave me another chance." Whether in Madison Square Garden or a small gym in Europe, Sugar never stopped playing. He just learned the hard way that some temptations are faster than even the quickest guard in the league. Number 4, Richard Dumas, the rookie who vanished. The year was 1993 and the Phoenix Suns were on fire. With Charles Barkley leading the charge and Kevin Johnson orchestrating the offense, the team stormed its way to the NBA Finals. But tucked into that unforgettable run was another story, a rising star who seemed poised to become a household name. Richard Dumas was only a rookie, yet he played with the poise and confidence of a seasoned veteran. Game after game, highlight after highlight, fans watched this smooth forward score effortlessly, slash to the rim, and knock down mid-range jumpers as if it were second nature. Commentators called him one of the league's brightest young prospects. But just as quickly as his star rose, it disappeared into the shadows. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1969, Dumas had basketball in his blood. His father, Rich Dumas, was a basketball coach, and young Richard spent his childhood in gyms studying the game. By the time he reached Oklahoma State University, he was a versatile forward with a long wingspan, soft shooting touch, and explosive first step. Scouts loved his combination of size and skill, and though off-court questions surrounded him even in college, his talent was too tempting to ignore. The Suns took a gamble on Dumas in the second round of the 1991 NBA draft. But before he could even take the floor for his rookie season, trouble struck. He was suspended for the entire 1991-92 season due to a violation of the NBA's substance abuse policy. It was a rocky start, but Phoenix stood by him, and when he finally debuted in the 1992-93 season, he wasted no time proving that their patience had been worth it. That rookie year was something special. Playing alongside Barkley and Johnson, Dumas averaged nearly 16 points per game on an incredible 52% shooting. He was fearless, attacking defenses with smooth drives, catching lobs in transition and knocking down open shots. His athleticism gave the Suns a dangerous scoring option, and his versatility allowed him to guard multiple positions. Phoenix fed off his energy, and fans believed they were watching the early stages of a future All-Star career. The Suns made it to the 1993 NBA Finals, and while they ultimately fell to Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls in a thrilling 6-game series, Dumas had left his mark. He was young, talented, and brimming with potential, the kind of player you build a franchise around. But potential is a fragile thing, especially when the battles off the court are as fierce as the ones on it. Just weeks before the 1993-94 season, the unthinkable happened. Dumas was suspended again, this time for an entire year, after another violation of the NBA's drug policy. For a player who had just lit up the league as a rookie, the news was devastating. His absence left a void in the Suns' rotation, but it was clear the issue was bigger than basketball. When he returned in 1995, he was still capable of flashes of brilliance, but something had changed. The explosiveness was dulled, the consistency gone. Dumas bounced briefly between Phoenix and the Philadelphia 76ers, but the momentum of his career had been shattered. In the hyper-competitive NBA, missing critical development years often meant never truly catching up again. Off the court, Dumas' struggles continued. His battles with addiction didn't end when his NBA career did. Over the years, he found himself in and out of legal trouble, including arrests related to theft and drug possession. The man who once looked like a franchise savior was now a cautionary tale, a reminder that talent alone isn't enough to survive in the league. Still, there were attempts at redemption. Dumas played in minor leagues, overseas, and in semi-pro circuits, trying to stay connected to the game that had given him so much, and, in many ways, taken just as much away. He also participated in community programs, sharing his story with young athletes as a warning about the dangers of substance abuse and the importance of discipline. His legacy remains one of unfulfilled promise. Suns fans still remember that rookie year fondly, the way he cut through defenses with ease, the way he seemed completely unfazed by the pressure of the NBA Finals. But they also remember how quickly it all unraveled. The phrase "what could have been" hangs over Dumas' career like a shadow, a reminder of both the fragility of success and the lasting impact of personal choices. In interviews years later, Dumas spoke with candor about his mistakes. He didn't hide from the truth, admitting that his choices, not bad luck, had cost him his career. "I had everything," he once said, "and I gave it away." There's a haunting honesty in those words, a self-awareness that comes too late to change the past but might be enough to influence someone else's future. Richard Dumas' story doesn't have the triumphant comeback arc that Hollywood loves. Instead, it's a quieter, more sobering narrative, one about the cost of losing focus, the speed at which opportunity can vanish, and the lifelong battle some athletes face even after the cheering stops. His brief time in the spotlight remains a bittersweet chapter in NBA history, a reminder that sometimes the most talented players are also the most vulnerable to the pressures and temptations that come with the game. Number 5, Chris Washburn, Wasted Potential. It was the summer of 1986, and the NBA draft buzzed with excitement. Just 2 picks after the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Brad Daugherty first overall, the Golden State Warriors stepped up to make their selection. With the 3rd pick, they chose a 6'11" forward/center out of North Carolina State, Chris Washburn. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, and the crowd murmured in anticipation. Washburn was billed as a can't-miss prospect, tall, strong, athletic, and blessed with natural scoring touch around the rim. On draft day, he looked like the kind of player who could anchor a franchise for years. What no one could see, or perhaps what some quietly feared, was how ill-prepared he truly was for the life ahead. Washburn's journey to the NBA was one of raw talent and high expectations. In high school, he was a dominant force, bullying defenders in the paint, running the floor like a forward half his size, and catching the attention of every major college program in the country. He eventually committed to NC State, where his size and agility made him an immediate contributor. Scouts were enamored with his combination of power and finesse, and whispers about his NBA future started before he even finished his freshman season. But even during his college days, there were red flags. Stories circulated about his questionable work ethic and lack of discipline. Washburn later admitted he struggled academically, to the point where he famously claimed to score just a single point on the SAT, and coaches noticed his inconsistency in practice. Still, when game time came, his talent was undeniable. 4 NBA teams desperate for size and skill, he was worth the risk. His rookie season in Golden State should have been the start of something special. Instead, it was the beginning of a downward spiral. Washburn struggled to adapt to the pace and physicality of the league. He was out of shape, often late to practice, and lacked the drive to improve. His minutes dwindled, his stats were unimpressive, and the media began to question whether the Warriors had made a colossal mistake with their high draft pick. Then came the bigger problem: cocaine. Washburn's off-court habits quickly became an open secret. He failed his first drug test not long into his career. The NBA's substance abuse policy at the time allowed for multiple chances, but instead of serving as a wake-up call, the suspension only seemed to accelerate his decline. He returned briefly, but his conditioning worsened and his focus was gone. By his 3rd failed drug test, the league had no choice but to issue a lifetime ban. Washburn's career, which had begun with so much promise, was over after just 72 games. 72 games, barely more than a single season, was all he had to show for being the 3rd overall pick in the draft. For Warriors fans, it was one of the most painful busts in franchise history, and for Washburn himself, it was the abrupt end of a dream. After his NBA exile, Washburn bounced around minor leagues and overseas teams, but nothing stuck. The structure and visibility of the NBA were gone, and with them went any remaining discipline he had left. His drug use continued, and his once bright future dimmed to almost nothing. Eventually, Washburn hit rock bottom. He entered rehab multiple times, battling an addiction that had cost him millions of dollars and the career he had worked his whole life to reach. Years later, in interviews, he spoke with rare honesty about his downfall. "I wasn't ready for the NBA," he admitted. "I had the talent, but I didn't have the maturity and I wasn't willing to put in the work." It was a sobering confession, one that revealed just how unprepared some young athletes are for the sudden fame, money, and pressure that comes with professional sports. Washburn's story became a cautionary tale not just about drugs, but about the dangers of wasted potential. Talent can get a player into the league, but without discipline, work ethic, and mental toughness, it won't keep them there. In the years since, Washburn has tried to turn his life into an example for others. He's spoken at youth programs, warning young athletes about the pitfalls of bad decisions and the importance of surrounding themselves with the right influences. He's candid about his mistakes, owning the fact that his NBA career was lost not to bad luck or injury, but to choices he made. Still, for basketball fans, especially those who remember the hype of that 1986 draft, the name Chris Washburn carries a tinge of sadness. He was supposed to be a franchise cornerstone, a dominant force in the paint for a decade or more. Instead, his name sits on the short list of the NBA's biggest busts, a reminder that not every draft day dream comes true. Washburn's career wasn't just short, it was almost a blink in NBA history. But the lessons from his story have echoed far longer. Coaches, scouts, and general managers often point to him when explaining why they value character and work ethic as much as raw ability. Because as Chris Washburn proved, even the most gifted athlete can throw it all away if they're not ready for the life that comes with the game. Number 6. Roy Tarpley, the repeat offender. It's the late 1980s in Dallas. The Reunion Arena crowd is electric, the Mavericks are on the rise, and in the middle of it all is a 7-foot power forward who seems destined to dominate for years to come. Roy Tarpley, with his long arms, relentless energy and nose for the ball, is everywhere, blocking shots, cleaning the glass, scoring in the post. In 1988, he's awarded the NBA's 6th Man of the Year, helping lead the Mavericks to the Western Conference Finals. The city believes they've found their future, a cornerstone to build around for the next decade. But behind the highlight reels, Tarpley is fighting a battle he can't seem to win, not against an opponent on the court but against himself. Tarpley's rise was rapid. Coming out of the University of Michigan, he was known as a skilled big man with agility that defied his size. The Mavericks picked him 7th overall in the 1986 NBA draft, and almost immediately he proved them right. His rookie season showed flashes of brilliance, but it was in his second year that he truly broke out. Averaging double-digit rebounds and providing a physical presence few could match, he was the perfect spark off the bench. Dallas, a relatively young franchise at the time, had visions of championships in their future, and Tarpley was central to those dreams. But even during his early success, warning signs began to surface. Rumors swirled about late-night partying, drinking, and behavior that concerned team officials. In 1989, those rumors became reality when Tarpley was suspended for violating the NBA's drug policy. It was a shock to Mavericks fans who saw him as a hard-working blue-collar player on the court. Still, the suspension was only temporary, and there was hope he'd learn from it. Tarpley came back, but the pattern repeated. Another violation, another suspension. The league's policy was clear: 3 strikes and a player could face a lifetime ban. But Tarpley wasn't able to stop the cycle. His talent was undeniable. Even after long stretches away from the game, he could return and instantly make an impact, but so was his inability to stay clean. By the early 90s, the Mavericks were growing frustrated. They had invested heavily in their young star, only to see him vanish from the lineup time and again. Each return brought optimism, but each relapse was another blow to the team's chemistry and morale. It wasn't just the franchise suffering. Tarpley himself seemed caught in a loop of hope and disappointment. The final blow came in 1995. After multiple failed attempts to stay in compliance with the league's substance abuse program, the NBA handed Tarpley a lifetime ban. He was just 30 years old. For a player of his size and skill, he could have had 5, maybe even 10 more productive years ahead of him. Instead, the door slammed shut on his NBA career. Banished from the league, Tarpley sought opportunities overseas. He played in Greece, Russia, and other countries, putting up strong numbers but never regaining the prestige or spotlight he once had. International basketball gave him a paycheck and a chance to keep playing, but it wasn't the NBA and it wasn't Dallas. For fans back home, his absence was a painful reminder of what could have been. Tarpley's life after basketball was marked by the same struggles that had haunted him during his career. Reports of arrests, probation violations, and ongoing issues with substance abuse filled the years after his final NBA game. Despite occasional appearances at Mavericks events, he never fully reconciled with the league or the life he had lost. In interviews, Tarpley often expressed regret but also frustration. He felt he had been unfairly treated at times, that the league's rules were too rigid. Yet he also acknowledged that he bore responsibility for his actions. Like many athletes caught in similar situations, he was torn between owning his mistakes and resenting the system that punished him. On January 9, 2015, Roy Tarpley died at the age of 50. The cause was reported as liver failure, the final chapter in a life that had been as much about struggle as it was about talent. For Mavericks fans, the news was heartbreaking. Tarpley wasn't just another player. He had been a symbol of hope during one of the franchise's most promising eras. His death wasn't just the loss of a former star. It was the loss of a man whose career and perhaps life could have been so much more if he'd been able to conquer his demons. Today, Roy Tarpley's name still sparks debate among basketball historians. Was he simply another cautionary tale, or was he a victim of a league that didn't yet have the resources to help players battling addiction? Regardless of the answer, his story remains a stark reminder of how quickly a promising career can crumble. For the Mavericks, the what if will always linger. What if Tarpley had stayed clean? What if he'd been part of a more structured support system? Could Dallas have reached the NBA Finals in the late 80s or early 90s? These questions will never have answers, but they keep his legacy alive, not just as a great rebounder and 6th Man of the Year, but as a talented athlete whose career was cut short by a battle he couldn't win. Number 7, Lindsey Hunter. The surprise suspension. The year is 2002, and the Los Angeles Lakers are in the middle of their dynasty run. Confetti rains down inside the Staples Center, Shaquille O'Neal is cracking jokes, Kobe Bryant is all smiles, and at the edge of the frame is Lindsey Hunter, veteran guard, grinning as he hoists his second NBA championship trophy. For most fans, Hunter's name didn't make the headlines like Shaq or Kobe, but inside locker rooms across the league, he was respected as a tough, smart, and dependable role player. In an era of high-flying superstars, Hunter carved his place through grit, defense, and professionalism. Lindsey Hunter's basketball journey began long before that 2002 celebration. Born in Jackson, Mississippi, and raised in Utica, he attended Jackson State University, where he became a star. His scoring ability, leadership, and defensive instincts caught the eye of NBA scouts, and in the 1993 NBA draft, the Detroit Pistons selected him 10th overall. Detroit was still shaking off the remnants of its bad boys era, but Hunter brought a defensive tenacity that fit perfectly with the franchise's identity. He could guard multiple positions, knock down timely shots, and run an offense without forcing the spotlight onto himself. Over the years, Hunter built a reputation as one of the league's most reliable role players. He wasn't flashy, but coaches trusted him. A guy who would execute the game plan, defend the opposing team's best guard, and keep the locker room steady. That reputation earned him jobs on contending teams, including the Lakers during their early 2000s dominance and later the Pistons, where he won his third NBA championship in 2004. For nearly 2 decades, he was the kind of player every coach wanted and every star needed. Someone who did the dirty work without complaint. That's why what happened in 2007 shocked the basketball world. At 36 years old, Hunter was in the twilight of his career, playing for the Pistons again and serving as a veteran mentor to younger guards like Chauncey Billups. He wasn't a player anyone expected to be caught up in scandal. But in March of that year, the NBA announced that Lindsey Hunter had been suspended 10 games for violating the league's drug policy. The news was met with disbelief. Hunter wasn't known for partying and his career had been spotless. When the details emerged, the story became even stranger. Hunter claimed the positive test was the result of a diet pill he had taken, something he said was purchased over the counter without realizing it contained a banned stimulant. He insisted there was no intent to cheat, no performance-enhancing scheme, just an unfortunate mistake. The league didn't budge. The NBA's policy was clear. Players were responsible for anything found in their system, regardless of intent. Hunter served his 10-game suspension, but the incident left a small mark on an otherwise clean record. While some fans brushed it off as a misunderstanding, others wondered how a veteran with nearly 15 years in the league could make such an oversight. When Hunter returned to the court, his role was much the same as before. He provided defense, ball handling, and veteran leadership off the bench. But the suspension was a reminder that the league's drug policy wasn't just about recreational drugs or performance-enhancing substances in the traditional sense. Even something as simple as a diet pill could sideline a player. It was a cautionary tale for younger athletes who might think over-the-counter meant risk-free. Despite the incident, Hunter's career ended on a high note in terms of longevity. He played until 2010, retiring after an incredible 17 seasons, far longer than most NBA players last. His ability to adapt, stay in shape, and find ways to contribute made him a valuable asset to multiple teams over nearly 2 decades. After hanging up his sneakers, Hunter moved into coaching. He joined the Phoenix Suns staff and in 2013, was named interim head coach after the team fired Alvin Gentry mid-season. While his stint as head coach was brief and came during a rebuilding year, it marked the continuation of his basketball journey in a new role. He later served as an assistant coach for the Golden State Warriors and the University at Buffalo, sharing the wisdom he had gained over his long career. Looking back, Hunter's 2007 suspension is often seen as an anomaly, a brief, strange chapter in an otherwise steady and professional NBA life. It didn't define him the way drug scandals defined others on this list. In fact, if anything, it highlighted just how strict and uncompromising the NBA's policies had become, even for veteran players with spotless reputations. For the fans who watched him in Detroit, Los Angeles, Toronto, and elsewhere, Lindsey Hunter's legacy is that of a consummate professional. A player who embraced his role, played tough defense, and did the little things that helped teams win. His 10-game absence in 2007 might have made headlines for a short time, but his 17-year career, 3 championships, and later contributions as a coach have ensured that one misstep doesn't overshadow the bigger picture. Still, the story remains a reminder. In the NBA, one moment, one decision, even something as seemingly harmless as a diet pill, can put a player under the microscope. And for a veteran like Hunter, it proved that no one, no matter how respected or experienced, was immune to the league's rules. Number 8, Don MacLean, the steroid scandal. It's the late 1990s and the Washington Bullets, a franchise still years away from becoming the Wizards, are in desperate need of scoring. On the court, Don MacLean delivers just that. A silky mid-range jumper, soft touch around the rim, and a knack for finding the net made him a reliable offensive weapon. For a team struggling for relevance in a competitive Eastern Conference, MacLean's 15 to 20-point performances were bright spots in otherwise difficult seasons. Watching him hit shot after shot, you wouldn't guess that years later his name would be linked to one of the most controversial moments in NBA drug policy history. Don MacLean's rise began long before he ever put on a Bullets jersey. At UCLA he was a basketball legend. Playing for the Bruins from 1988 to 1992, he became the school's all-time leading scorer. No small feat considering the program's rich history of stars. MacLean wasn't the most athletic player on the court, but his shooting, footwork, and basketball IQ made him nearly unstoppable at the college level. He had a natural scorer's touch, and when the Washington Bullets selected him 19th overall in the 1992 NBA draft, expectations were high. His early years in the league validated those expectations. After a rookie season spent adjusting to the NBA's physicality, MacLean broke out in his second year, averaging over 18 points per game and earning the NBA's Most Improved Player award in 1994. For a forward who didn't rely on brute strength or above-the-rim play, his ability to put points on the board stood out. He played with patience, using screens effectively and exploiting mismatches with his size and shooting ability. MacLean's career took him to several teams, including the Denver Nuggets, Philadelphia 76ers, New Jersey Nets, and Seattle Supersonics. But he was best remembered for his time in Washington. He was a player coaches trusted to provide offense, whether starting or coming off the bench. By the late 90s, however, his career had started to slow. Injuries and age began chipping away at his production. In the hyper-athletic, fast-paced NBA of the 2000s, staying competitive as a veteran forward was no easy task. Then came the moment that changed his legacy forever. In November 2000, the NBA announced that Don MacLean had been suspended 5 games for violating the league's drug policy. The offense? Steroid use. It was the first time in NBA history that a player had been suspended for performance-enhancing drugs. The news sent shockwaves through the league. While drug suspensions weren't uncommon, particularly in cases involving recreational drugs, steroids were another matter entirely. The NBA had long been seen as a league where PEDs were less of a concern compared to sports like baseball or football. For many fans, MacLean's suspension was the first time they realized that the league even tested for such substances. MacLean maintained his innocence, publicly stating that he had no reason to use steroids and that the positive test must have been the result of a mistake or misunderstanding. In interviews he pointed out that steroids wouldn't necessarily make sense for his style of play. He wasn't a high flyer or a player who relied on brute force. Still, the suspension stuck, and history recorded him as the NBA's first steroid case. The fallout was swift. Already in the later stages of his career, MacLean struggled to find a stable role after the suspension. His minutes decreased, and his scoring numbers continued to drop. While some veterans fade out quietly, MacLean's final seasons were shadowed by the stigma of being the steroid guy, a label no player wants. By 2001, MacLean was out of the league. His NBA career had lasted 9 seasons, with averages of just under 11 points per game. On paper, it was a respectable career. Not an all-star but a consistent scorer who carved out a niche in the most competitive basketball league in the world. But for many, his legacy was now tied to that 2000 suspension. MacLean didn't disappear from the basketball world, though. In fact, his post-playing career was arguably more visible than his time on the court. He transitioned into broadcasting, becoming a television analyst for NBA games and later a well-regarded commentator for Pac-12 college basketball coverage. His deep knowledge of the game, combined with his UCLA roots, made him a natural fit behind the microphone. Fans who knew him only as an analyst might not even realize that he was once at the center of an NBA drug scandal. Still, the steroid suspension remains a curious footnote in NBA history. It didn't spark a wave of similar cases, and the league has rarely had to enforce PED-related punishment since. Whether MacLean was truly guilty of knowingly using steroids or was simply an unfortunate first in a new era of testing remains a matter of debate among basketball historians. What is clear is that Don MacLean's story stands out from many of the other drug cases in NBA history. This wasn't about cocaine addiction, recreational partying, or poor off-court choices. This was about performance enhancement, a realm the NBA has largely avoided in the public eye. Whether intentional or accidental, The suspension ensured that his name would be forever etched into the league's record books for something other than his silky jump shot. In the end, MacLean's career is a reminder of how fragile a player's reputation can be. Years of hard work and scoring achievements can be overshadowed by a single incident. But it's also a story about resilience, how a player can reinvent himself, find new purpose, and build a respected second career even after controversy. Number 9, Shawn Kemp. From Rain Man to Rumors. It's the 1996 NBA Finals, and the Seattle Supersonics are going toe-to-toe with Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls. On the court, a 26-year-old Shawn Kemp is an unstoppable force. He's soaring above defenders, throwing down thunderous dunks and racking up rebounds with ease. Nicknamed the Rain Man by a Seattle radio announcer, Kemp is more than just a star. He's a human highlight reel, an athlete whose blend of size, strength, and leaping ability made him one of the most electrifying players of the 90s. Kemp's rise began in the late 80s when he made the leap to the NBA directly from high school, something almost unheard of at the time. Drafted 17th overall by the Supersonics in 1989, Kemp was raw but brimming with potential. It didn't take long for him to capture fans' attention. His dunks weren't just powerful, they were artistic. The way he would cradle the ball, explode off the floor, and hang in the air made each slam a statement. By the mid-90s, he had formed one of the league's most feared duos with point guard Gary Payton, blending Payton's defensive tenacity and playmaking with Kemp's explosive finishing. From 1993 to 1998, Kemp was a 6-time NBA All-Star and 3-time All-NBA selection. He averaged double-digit rebounds and was a nightmare for opponents in transition. During that 96 finals run, Kemp was arguably the best player on the floor for Seattle, averaging 23.3 points and 10 rebounds per game against a Bulls team that had gone 72-10 in the regular season. While Jordan walked away with another championship, Kemp's performance cemented his status as one of the league's elite big men. But success at that level comes with intense pressure, and behind the scenes trouble was brewing. After the 1997-98 season, Kemp was traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers in a 3-team deal. Almost immediately, fans noticed a change. The once chiseled forward began to show signs of weight gain. While he still put up solid numbers, averaging 20 points and 9 rebounds in his first season with Cleveland, the explosive bounce that defined his game wasn't quite the same. Rumors swirled about his conditioning and off-court lifestyle. By the early 2000s, the whispers had grown louder. Reports of drug use began to surface, with speculation that substance abuse was contributing to his decline. Though never officially suspended by the NBA for drug violations during his playing career, the combination of weight issues, declining performance, and persistent rumors painted a picture of a player struggling to maintain his professional edge. In 2000, Kemp was traded to the Portland Trail Blazers, a team that at the time had developed an infamous reputation for having players with off-court problems. In Portland, the struggles continued. His minutes decreased, his production dropped, and his athleticism seemed like a distant memory. After being waived by the Blazers in 2002, Kemp attempted a comeback with the Orlando Magic in 2002-03, but the experiment was short-lived. By 2003, at just 33 years old, his NBA career was over. A stunning fall for someone who had been one of the league's brightest stars less than a decade earlier. The post-retirement years brought more challenges. In 2005, Kemp was arrested in Washington for investigation of drug possession, and in 2006 he faced another arrest in Texas on similar charges. These incidents seemed to confirm what many had speculated during his playing days, that drugs had played a role in his decline. Each arrest chipped away at the image of the charismatic dunk machine who once energized crowds in Seattle. But Kemp's story isn't just about downfall, it's also about resilience and reinvention. In the years following his arrest, he made efforts to turn his life around. Kemp stayed connected to the game through appearances, interviews, and involvement in youth basketball programs. He also became a vocal supporter of bringing an NBA team back to Seattle after the Supersonics' relocation to Oklahoma City in 2008. For the city's basketball fans, Kemp remained a beloved figure, a reminder of the glory days of the 90s Sonics. In a twist that surprised many, Kemp eventually entered the business world, opening a cannabis dispensary in Seattle in 2020. The venture was both ironic and fitting. Ironic because of the drug rumors that had haunted his career, but fitting because it reflected the legal and cultural shift around cannabis in Washington state. Kemp embraced his new role as a businessman, presenting himself as an example of personal growth and entrepreneurship after sports. Looking back, Kemp's career arc is a mixture of brilliance and frustration. At his peak, he was a matchup nightmare, Too fast for big men to guard, too strong for smaller players to contain. His highlights still circulate online, inspiring younger fans who never saw him play live. Yet the what-if factor looms large. What if he had maintained peak conditioning? What if the off-court distractions hadn't taken such a toll? Could he have been remembered alongside the greatest power forwards in NBA history? The answers remain speculation, but one truth is undeniable. Shawn Kemp left a mark on the game that can't be erased. His dunks are still replayed in NBA highlight reels. His connection with Seattle fans remains strong. And his story, complete with soaring highs, painful lows, and eventual redemption, remains one of the most compelling in basketball history. For those who saw him in the 90s, Shawn Kemp will always be the Rain Man, the player who could bring an arena to its feet with a single leap. His legacy may be complicated, but it's unforgettable. Number 10, Chris Andersen, the Birdman's redemption. The camera zooms in on a tall, wiry forward with a mohawk and a body covered in bright, intricate tattoos. The crowd in Miami roars as he swats away yet another shot, pumping his fist in celebration. This is Chris Andersen, better known as the Birdman, a player whose high-flying energy, flamboyant style, and relentless hustle made him one of the most unforgettable characters in modern NBA history. Andersen's journey to the NBA wasn't the usual top prospect path. Born in Long Beach, California, and raised in Iola, Texas, he was far from the radar of major college programs. His route took him through junior college ball, then to the International Basketball Association, and eventually to the NBA Development League. In 2001, his big break came when he became the first D-League player called up to the NBA, signing with the Denver Nuggets. Right from the start, Andersen wasn't a star in the traditional sense. He didn't light up the scoreboard or dominate the ball. Instead, he carved out a niche as an energy player, diving for loose balls, contesting every shot, and finishing alley-oops with thunderous dunks. His flamboyant look, complete with wild hair and full-arm tattoos, only added to his growing popularity among fans. He embraced his Birdman nickname, often spreading his arms like wings after big plays, a gesture that became his signature. By the mid-2000s, Andersen had developed into a valuable role player for the New Orleans Hornets, now Pelicans, but in 2006 his career came to a screeching halt. The NBA announced that Andersen had been suspended for violating the league's drug policy, reportedly for drugs of abuse, a category that typically refers to hard drugs rather than performance enhancers. The suspension wasn't a short-term setback. Under league rules, Andersen was banned for a minimum of 2 years before he could apply for reinstatement. For many players, that kind of punishment is the end. 2 years away from the game can be a death sentence for a career, especially for someone who relied on energy and athleticism. The news shocked fans who had come to see Andersen as a hard-working, if eccentric, figure. Overnight, the Birdman's wings were clipped, and the NBA chapter of his life appeared to be over. But Andersen wasn't ready to disappear. During his suspension, he sought help, went through rehabilitation, and tried to rebuild himself both physically and mentally. By the time he applied for reinstatement in 2008, he was determined to show that his story wouldn't be defined by a suspension. The league approved his return, and the Denver Nuggets, remembering the energy he once brought, gave him another shot. It didn't take long for Andersen to remind fans what they had missed. He returned to Denver with the same fearless shot-blocking, rim-running style, and an even more eye-catching array of tattoos. He became one of the NBA's top shot blockers despite playing limited minutes, helping the Nuggets reach the Western Conference Finals in 2009. The Birdman's redemption arc was underway, and the fans embraced it wholeheartedly. In 2013, Andersen's career reached its peak. Midway through the season, he signed with the Miami Heat, a team led by LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, and in the middle of a bid for back-to-back championships. While Andersen wasn't a star, his presence off the bench was critical. He brought energy, defense, and an emotional spark to a veteran team. During the playoffs, he famously shot 80.7% from the field, an almost absurd level of efficiency, and his defensive work gave Miami a valuable edge in tight games. That summer, Andersen's comeback was complete. He was an NBA champion. Standing on the court in his white Heat jersey, tattoos glistening under the arena lights, he had gone from a player exiled from the league to one holding the Larry O'Brien Trophy. The fans loved it, his teammates respected it, and the league recognized it as one of the most impressive turnarounds in recent memory. Even as his career wound down, Andersen's impact remained. He played stints with the Heat, Memphis Grizzlies, and Cleveland Cavaliers before retiring in 2017. Off the court, he stayed active in charity events and continued to connect with fans, often sharing his story as a warning and inspiration for younger players. Andersen's legacy isn't about massive scoring numbers or MVP awards, it's about resilience. He's living proof that a career can survive a devastating fall if the player is willing to confront mistakes, put in the work, and seize a second chance. The Birdman's high-energy play, combined with his offbeat personality, left a mark on the league that few role players ever achieve. In the end, Chris Andersen's story is one of rare redemption in a series full of tragic declines. Where others in NBA history were undone by their battles with substances, Andersen found a way back, flying again when it seemed like his wings had been clipped for good.